Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. And if you're returning, how are you today? In today's video, I want to talk about what to put in a Great Depression pantry. And these are things that I learned from when my grandmother, when she was still with us, what she would tell me about how what it was like when she was growing up, what her parents were doing, my great grandparents, what they did back then and stuff like that. And the one thing that she always stressed to me, she would always say, Gyps, she said, you got to get back to basics in the kitchen, Gypsy. You got to get back to basics. She said, you don't buy the box stuff, Gyps. Don't buy the box stuff. She said, always said, you got to cook from scratch, Gyps. That's the only way. Okay, Grandmama, all right. So, and the other thing that she said, excuse me, I have an itch on my eye. She always said that that they always canned everything. So, and I'm sure they didn't have pressure canners back then, so I'm sure it was like water bath canning, dry canning, things like that. So, just not only getting back to basics in the kitchen, but learning how to can everything. Also, learn how to cook all parts of meat from animals, really. It's not just, certain parts of, like what you see in the grocery store. It's learning how to cook all parts, even like, the organs. For God's sakes, but, I'm sure hunters know more about that than I do. I've never had to do anything like that, so I'm not going to sit here and say that I do because I don't. So, but she said that her father knew how to do all of that, how to cook all parts, all kinds of different meats from in all different parts of an animal. She said they always had a garden, which, you know me, I have my garden. So I learned from my grandparents how to have a garden. One fact about me that not a lot of people know about, with the exception of my family, is growing up. Yes, I grew up in Atlantic City. Okay, my mom was a cop. My dad was the fire chief in Atlantic City. All right, but my grandparents, they lived in a town called Morristown, New Jersey. And my grandparents, they bred and raised racehorses. So I lived on a horse farm in the summertime. And they had a huge farm. We had cows, we had pigs, we had chickens and stuff like that. So we always had this real big field, and it was all garden. And I remember my grandfather taking me on a tractor and, plowing fields and stuff like that. I do remember that, even though I was just, little, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. I remember doing that with my grandpa. So I do remember doing all that. And when I started pressure canning, and I told my mother, she always said, oh my goodness, Gypsy. She said, I remember doing that when I was younger with my parents. So my great-grandparents did the pressure canning, well, probably water bath canning and dry canning. My grandparents continued to do it and taught my mother, my aunt, and my uncle, and now I'm doing it. So, it went down the line. And the other thing is, my grandmother always said, you should really focus on the basics. What she meant by that, I'm guessing, just focus on basic needs and not the extra luxuries. How we as people are so spoiled to certain things, like, like gourmet, this and gourmet that, So focus on the basics. I'm guessing that's what she always meant, was focus on the basics. Now, quite a few of the things that I remember her always saying, and I actually called my mom and I said, Mom, I said, can you remember, what really was in the pantry at and Grandpa's house? And she goes, oh boy, do I. She said, because this is what we grew up on. This is what we ate. She said, and that's it, So she said, we always had honey. And I said, well, because honey has literally like a forever shelf life. And she goes, yeah. She goes, and Grandma always had it in her tea. So, and my mother still has honey in her tea. And even my mother-in-law does that. Even I do that. So they always had honey and beans, dry beans, flour. But at my grandfather's farm, they had wheat. They grew wheat, like wheat berries. So my grandmother with the grinder. With the grinder. So my mother always said that she was always grinding those wheat berries. But then again, they would also sell this stuff too. So, that's how they made their living, not only with the racehorses, but also with their garden. Sugar. She said they always with the sugar. She said my grandmother was crazy when it came to sugar. And she said, and that's because during the Great Depression, sugar was literally rationed. And she said, so it was literally like it had its weight in gold, sugar. So my grandmother was always nuts when it came to sugar. And she said she would always say, it's too much, that's enough. And I even remember growing up, my grandmother would always say, that, you're using too much, that type of thing. So I guess old habits die hard, that type of thing. And seasonings. So, seasonings was always a big thing back then. It's still a big thing today. You've seen in my other video that I did about my one prepper pantry with all my seasonings and stuff like that. I go nuts with seasonings. I don't know if it's because I'm Italian or if it's just because, I'm nuts like that and I just love to have as many seasonings as I can get my hands on. I don't know. And fat resources. Now she said because I said, well, Mom, fat resources, I said, explain. And she said, like Crisco, Jips, Crisco. And I said, okay. And then she goes, and butter, not butter. Well, butter is one of them, but she said bacon fat. She said, you'd be surprised. She said, Jips, you don't remember. Grandpa had like vats, literally, full of bacon fat. And my grandmother would jar it up and they would sell it. Because back then, I guess it was so hard to come by. So, yeah, fat resources. Oatmeal, pasta, rice, peanut butter, popcorn, canned fruits, and salt. She said, a lot of salt. She said they would, how did she put it? Cure the meat? Is that what it was? Cure the meat with salt? So, yeah. Now, this is coming from my mother, which, she watched my grandparents, obviously, and my grandparents learned from my great-grandparents. And my great-grandparents, they came over here from Sicily, so, and so did my grandparents because they weren't born here. So, this is just, them learning and stuff like that. So, yeah, I just wanted to, share with you what my mother grew up with, what she learned from my grandparents and from my great-grandparents. So, but that's all for this video. I just wanted to share with you what it took for my great-grandparents and my grandparents and stuff like that, and what my mother learned and what she taught me on what to put in a Great Depression pantry. So, and really, I think that we should get back to that. Not saying that, that's where we're headed, but maybe it would be best if we got back to basics. Cooking from scratch. Forget about all the little frilly stuff and the gourmet this and the gourmet that. I mean, okay, I'm guilty of loving my coffee. Okay, I'm guilty. I'm guilty of loving my flavored coffees. Okay, because the one thing that my grandmother, up until the day she died, Sanka. I think I talked about this before. Sanka coffee. I'll never forget growing up. Every time we'd go over, she'd have Sanka coffee and an Entenmann's. Was it just Italian households that did this? I don't know. You're going to have to let me know. But even my mother, what does she have in the pantry? Sanka. So, it's, listen. And like they didn't have, like, I don't know if they couldn't get their hands on milk, but I know that they had the condensed milk. I remember my father-in-law telling me they didn't get milk. They got powdered milk. And he was, oh my God, he's been gone 5 years now. But he would be, let's see, he's 2 years younger than my dad. My dad's 78, so he would be 76 now. So going back then, when he was little, they got powdered milk. So, it just goes to show, I mean, we really need to get, this is just my opinion, we really need to get back to basics, especially in the kitchen. Get back to drinking Sanka. With some powdered milk, maybe. Condensed milk. Go light on the sugar. Because let's face it, we're sweet enough, aren't we? All right, I'm done. I love you. Sean's home. I'll talk to you soon. Stay safe, stay positive. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.